In this art appetizer technique lesson, we will be painting the background of a paper in a method that resembles horizontal and vertical lines of a weaving, with the brush strokes acting like the strands of yarn or fibers in a crisscrossing pattern. There are many ways to do this. No need to follow the exact brush strokes or color decisions that I make to create this woven or plaid background look. The materials that we will be using for this project are a mixed media paper or watercolor paper, water, and a variety of brushes so that you have some round, some flat, some smaller, finer, and some wider, and a variety of acrylics paints. I've chosen some fine art acrylics, craft acrylics, fluid acrylics, and some white gesso. So let's begin. The idea is to randomly paint some lines, both vertically and horizontally, straight lines all the way across the paper with varying colors of coordinating paint. This particular paint was a little bit dry, so I dipped my brush in the water. You might have to go back and forth over the strokes to get a nice smooth coating of paint, or you might like the brush stroke look where some of the paint is, some of the paper is showing through. Your choice if you wash off your brush in between colors or if you don't. Also, I usually don't use a palette. I'm kind of a dip the brush into the paint bottle type of person. I'm starting with some of the bigger brushes first in case I want to layer some smaller lines on top of them. Try to vary the spacing between your lines, as well as changing the colors, or sometimes even putting two colors on your brush at the same time. Okay, here's me pouring out the white gesso onto the brush that already has a little paint on it. Yes, I do this. And then those two colors mixed on their own. I'm also going to use instead of the wide part of the brush, I'm going to use the brush sideways to get a different variation of thickness. You're trying to paint straight lines that are 90 degrees perpendicular to each other. keep going until you have a pleasant arrangement of plaid colors. At this point, my paint is starting to smear a lot, so I'm going to take a break and let it dry. If your page is very wet and you think that the colors will smear too much by continuing, either let it dry on its own or use a heat gun. Sometimes when I do this, I go for more of a blended design, and other times I opt for crisp, clean lines that don't smear or mix as much. But usually I tend to like it when the paint does its own thing and mixes to some extent. If you find yourself in a position where something has smeared too much for your liking, let it dry completely and then paint a new clean line over the top of it. There are a couple places where this still has a little bit of a wet puddle, but for the most part it's fairly dry, so I'm ready to add another layer of vertical and horizontal stripes and let it dry again, repeating that process until I'm satisfied with the results. Sometimes I like to do a glaze layer so you can see the other paints through it, and sometimes I like to let the paints show up on their own. Also, here's an example of a wet stripe on top of a dry layer with a skinnier brush on the top stripe. I'll pause for another layer of drying, then I'll come back and revisit it, keeping in mind the placement of the dark and light values and seeing where I'd like to go from here. Onto another layer of painting. I would like to break up these purples and bring some brighter colors into there. To finish off this woven plaid background paper with some splatters of white gesso paint. You could tap two paintbrushes together with watery paint, but for some reason the technique that I like most is to tap against my scissors. I think my scissors likes to be included in a little fun splattering. So I've got the gesso on my paintbrush, dipping it in water so it's really wet, and doing some splattering, paying attention to the corners, the edges, as well as the center of the paper. I am thinking that I would like to go with a little yellow as well and use the smaller brush for some finer splatters with this color. Okay, so that is the painted weaving background technique in this art appetizer lesson. You can go on to do whatever you want on top of it for an art journal page. You could fold it for the cover of a mini book. You could use it for a collage or any number of things. It would even look nice with some photographs collaged on top of it, especially where that big splatter is. I'd like to cover that up. You could even cut it into strips and actually weave those strips of paper together into a real 3D paper weaving. Have fun.